Today's video is all about a brand new product from KOSAS. This is their Glow IV Vitamin Infused Skin Enhancer. So I'm going to be demoing this in a couple of different ways. I'll be fully reviewing this product and providing a few comparisons for other similar type products that I have in my collection. So if you'd like to see all of that, just keep on watching. Before we get into it, if you're new here, welcome. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, I would love for you to consider doing so if you like this video and you like my content. I like to focus on high-end, luxury, and indie makeup. I film in completely natural light, so my goal is always to show you products as accurately as possible, and I like to do a combination of reviewing new makeup, demoing products, but also dipping into my collection and playing with some of my older makeup. So if all of that sounds good to you, I would love for you to consider subscribing. I feel like there's quite a lot to talk about with this product, so let's get right into it. I want to start out by showing you the demos of me applying this. I wanted to show you its application in two different ways. So on this side of my face, I decided to use it more as a glowy primer, and I basically put it all over this whole side of my face, right on top of my skincare before applying any other makeup. I focused more of the product on my cheekbone so that I could get a little bit more glow there, and you could also see how the product looks when it's built up a little bit more, and what the color looks like and so on. For reference, my skin tone is very fair, and I tend toward a more neutral undertone, but almost leaning toward a more kind of neutral warm with a little bit of yellow and even a little bit of green in my undertone. The surface of my skin on my face tends to be quite red though, because I have that surface redness. But when I'm doing a complexion match, I'm almost always trying to match more to my neck and my chest, which you'll be able to see in the demo of me applying this, which is a lot lighter and doesn't have nearly as much of that surface pinkness and redness. And I'll get back to the tone of this a little bit more later on in the video. On the other side of my face, I didn't use this as a primer, but instead I used it more as a mixing medium for my complexion products. So for this side, I mixed a little bit of this product with my foundation on the back of my hand. For foundation today, I used the Sisley Phyto-Teint Nude, and this is in the shade, I think, 000N. And I find this to be a little bit peachier than I want it to be on its own. So I mixed a bit of the Rare Beauty Concealer in 100W, which is quite yellow toned, but still nice and light, and the Chanel Green Color Corrector in with that to create my foundation today. And so on this side, I had the mixture with the KOSAS, and then on this side, I just applied the combination of foundation concealer products on top of the KOSAS. And I didn't find a huge difference in the end resulting appearance between those two methods. So I found I got the same kind of level of glow and coverage regardless of whether I was using this as a primer or as a mixer. On the positive side, I do find this definitely adds a glow, which is really nice. That's, I think, the main purpose of this is to add glow to your complexion. But I find there are a number of downsides, and some will be specific to me, and others I think are probably more universal downsides that will apply to a number of people. For me personally, this is the lightest shade, and this is a very common issue that I have. It's not really light enough for my skin. And so this shade is called Revive, and as I said, it's the lightest shade in the range. And you can see that it is quite a bit darker than the skin on my hand, which is pretty close to the skin on my neck and chest that I'm always trying to match. So that's one downside. If I were to use this on its own as just like a glowy skincare kind of look, it would be too dark for me. It's not so much that it's darker than the face on my skin without makeup, because I have that redness, which really significantly darkens the look of my skin on my face. But it's not light enough to bring up that tone enough to make it look a little bit more natural and matching to the rest of my skin. So that's one issue. It's also quite warm, so it has that kind of peachy, almost orangey undertone to it. It's described as a very light champagne. I would say it's maybe very light, but certainly not fair or very fair. And as far as champagne goes, I tend to think of champagne as a little bit more yellowy, a little less peachy orangey, but that's of course open to interpretation. For comparison of the tone, I wanted to show you the Auric Glow Lust in the shade Morganite. So this to me is a more ideal shade, and it's a similar type of product that can be used multiple ways. And the main point of it is to add glow. So you can see Morganite there is quite a lot lighter. And that brings me to my next point about the texture of this product. All of these glowy type products are of course going to have some shimmer, some ingredient that's going to bring that glow that's beyond just the formula itself. So you need some sort of shimmery particle in most of these products. And in this one, I find the shimmers are too big and they're much more noticeable than I would like them to be. With this type of product, for me, it's ideal to have the shimmers be very, very, very fine so that they're almost undetectable and they're not gonna look like glitter at all on the skin. Unfortunately, with this, I find this does actually look quite glittery on the skin, and it might not come across on camera, but it definitely comes across in natural light. I did a big blended swatch of this on my hand, which I'll show you, and I held up a flashlight to it so I could really try to get you to see the glittery effect that this has. Again, I'm not sure how well it will come across on camera, but in real life, I definitely see kind of chunkier, glittery, shimmery particles that I really don't appreciate with this. I also did a similar big blended out swatch of the Auric and did the same thing with the flashlight just so you could see the difference. And there you can see it is picking up some of the shimmery particles as well, but they're much more refined and much more uniform to my eye and more finely milled than the ones in the KOSAS product. Another downside that may be more my thing, but I think it will apply to some other people, is that this smells quite strong to me. So I don't know if it actually has added fragrance in it or it's just the smell of the ingredients, but to me this has quite a strong floral scent to it, which is just not my favorite, and I find it does actually linger for several minutes after application. So that's another thing that I don't love about it. I'm not completely averse to scents, but I am quite sensitive to them, so I'm easily offended by scents that just don't appeal to me. And when that's the case, they can seem even stronger than maybe they are, but it's just not a scent that really agrees with me. So I think those are my main points about this. I'm not a huge fan. I think there are benefits to it, but for me, the downsides outweigh the benefits. And I just think that there are a lot of products that are meant for a similar purpose that perform better than this one. So one example is the Auric Glow Lust, which I love. I wanted to also talk quickly about the Lisa Eldridge Elevated Glow highlighters, which in my mind are a little bit different. I tend to use these more as highlighters, or I use them under my eyes as well. but not so much usually as like an overall primer or a mix in, although they do work that way. I do that sometimes, but that's just not my go-to use for these. But I wanted to show you shade comparisons at least so you could see those. So here are those comparisons. So again, this is the KOSAS in the shade Revive. Down here we have the Auric Morganite shade. And then on the end here is Lisa Eldridge Pink Moon Elevated Glow. And then down on my wrist here is the Lisa Eldridge Elevated Glow in the shade Crystal Nebula. So I would say Crystal Nebula is a similar depth to the KOSAS, but it is more of a yellow kind of golden undertone as opposed to the more kind of peachy, apricot, orangey type undertone in the KOSAS. So overall, as I said, I'm not a huge fan of this. I do like the packaging, so that's one upside to it. I think the yellow is very joyful and the pump works pretty well. I think the other alternatives that I've shown you are a little bit more expensive than this one, but for me, they're still worth it because they just perform better and give me more of the result that I'm looking for from this type of product. I think, of course, the main inspiration for this was probably the Charlotte Tilbury Flawless Filter, which we're seeing a lot of brands coming up with products that I think are meant to kind of imitate or emulate the effect of that product. And I don't have that to show you because, again, the shade range isn't good for me. They don't have really a light enough shade, but I have used that before. I did have a bottle of it years ago, and it just wasn't one of my favorite products. I went through it, but I found it didn't give as much glow as these other products actually, and so it just wasn't the ideal one for me. But I just wanted to mention that here because I think it is probably the primary inspiration for this product. Today wasn't my first time trying this. I've used this, I think, 2 other days before filming this. One day I mixed it with a concealer for an all-over base, and then another time I tried it as just a highlighting product, and I had similar results to the ones that I did today and the same kinds of thoughts with having issues with those kind of chunkier looking glitters. I don't find this is very smoothing on the skin, where I find the Lisa Eldridge and the Auric both have the ability to add the glow at the same time as adding some kind of smoothing, and in the case of the Lisa Eldridge, some kind of more tightening type properties. And the Auric, I find, actually also gives a little bit of a slight blur to the skin as well, which I think is more a property of the way the light reflects from it, but I don't get any of those benefits from the KOSAS either. For all those reasons, this is not my favorite, and for me personally, I wouldn't recommend this, especially over the 2 other products that I focused on here today. So that's it for this video. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. I'd love to see those. If you'd like to see more from me and you haven't subscribed to my channel already, I'd love for you to do so. Thank you again so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.